Hey everyone, it's Tiny Some Logan back with another video for you. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Asus Prime case, as it says here, and they call it the AP201. Now this is an M80X case that can swallow masses of hardware, big fat graphics cards, 360mm radiator, fans in the bottom, but acres and acres of mesh, even though it's a small case. And they do still technically market it as a bit of an ITX case as well, although I will talk to you about that in more depth in a minute. So go and get your tea and biscuits, get tuned in, because it's time for us to have a case review. Now, it may seem like a strange play to start with what is an empty case, but I think as we move around, because of space constraints, you understand why I wanted to do it this way first, and then I'll show it with hardware in a minute. So, as we always do, we start at the front and at the top, two USB 3s, headphone and a microphone, and then a Type-C, separate headphone and a microphone as well. When we go up to the top, you can see that there's the continuation of the lovely mesh, and you just have to give it a quick pop, and then that exposes our offset fan mounts and radiator mounts. So you can see that you've got 120mm and 140mm mounts, although the 120 is the most offset, which would mean you can easily get some rather fat radiators in here above the motherboard. But we'll look at that in more depth in a minute anyway. So 120 and 140s in the roof, and that means you can easily get a 360mm radiator in the roof, which is rather vast. Now when we turn the case on to its back, you can remove the magnetic dust filter, which again is all white, which is really nice. Now you can see there's a lot of mesh down here, and there are actually mounts for 120mm fans. And as you can see, I've had to just get the manual out because I've had no information from Asus about this at all. So it's normally one of those ones where you kind of get given a load of stuff that you can go through, but you can put 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch hard drives down here. And there are mounts here and here for, well, 120mm fans. I'm not seeing a mount on this side for 120mm fans, but you'll see why when we get inside, although I think you probably could have got away with this. But I think this is just them being slightly safe for end users, basically. One of the things that I would like to draw attention to are the case feet, though, while we're here, because they're not just a normal boring plastic. They're actually kind of translucent, and they catch the light quite nicely. And I've just never seen that on a case before, and I kind of like it. Now also, all of the panels are pop clipped in. You literally pop it out, pop clips at the top, and then you can lift the panels off. And weirdly, there is no dust filtering on any of the side panels, or either of the side panels. As you can see there, no dust filtering, and there's no dust filtering on the front either. So quite strangely, they have only put dust filtering on the bottom, where you technically would have to manually fit fans if you wanted them. But any other entry point, you're not going to be able to. Now you can get magnetic mesh panels that you could use and kind of customize at home. And I think for those of you out there that are going to leave a system on for a very long time, I think that's going to be something that you're going to possibly want to look into. Now this was where I was saying to you before at the front about there isn't a 120mm fan mount up here, and you could have done, but the power supply fits here, so your cabling is all going to end up down here. So I completely understand why it's not there. I just kind of thought that it was one of those ones where it would have been nice to have had a 360 in the bottom and a 360 in the floor. Now there is a way that you could do that, but I need to talk to you about that at the end, rather than waffling you completely at this stage. When we look around the back, if I move that slightly forward, you can see that you have your 3-pin kettle plug for the power supply, which is routed along the back, and then you can pop it in to the power supply at this side, because the plug is pre-routed, and that's how you can do that. You can remove the power supply cage if you like for easy install, because you're not going to be able to get it around the bottom. There's just a couple of screws for that. Now, on the inside, no grommets, very open. Comes with one single 120mm fan, and it is branded with Prime. Blades look to be kind of like an airflow style. Now, there are 4 tabs at the back, so you could fit an M80X case if you wanted. I'm going to assume though this is going to appeal mainly to ITX users though that are going to want a large graphics card, because it is still quite a small case. Now, above the motherboard you have just under 60mm of room, meaning you can get a 30mm thick radiator in the top with your fans fitted, not a problem. So it's pretty much on the money for that. Other than that, if you were to be thinking about thicker radiators, which obviously then going to become incredibly dominant in this area of the case, I happen to think though that if you haven't got very, very tall memory modules, DDR4, DDR5 memory modules, then you could possibly get a 60mm radiator in the roof. The complicating point in reality is going to come to the power supply cover at the front, which is going to leave you with about 20mm of room there to get your power supply, to get the actual main power into it. So it's not impossible, but it would be very tight. I think a 45 would probably be as thick as I'd like to go. And then radiators in the bottom, in reality, that's going to come down to how thick your graphics card is, because obviously there are some monstrously thick graphics cards, but if you're going water cooling, you're going to save a lot of time, and you could easily put a 240 and a set of fans in the bottom there, which for an ITX rig, that's an awful lot of cooling. Now, one of the nice things about it being a slightly larger case, as in it can accept M80X, which the board would come all the way down to here, because an M80X has a maximum of 4 slots. It does mean that it can take the DTX, which is basically a slightly larger ITX board, which is this impact, and a lot of the times with ITX cases they can't. And just for kind of size reference, that is a normal ITX case. And as you can see, with a normal ITX case, it would only use this single slot, but the board would go right the way across the bottom of the I/O. So you get that little bit of extra depth, and this case can take it. But I think one of the things that Asus have neglected to include, or forgotten, or don't care about, is the fact that we have the big open area here. And I think it might have been nice if they'd have had some kind of grommet or something that you could have put in there just to cover it up. Yes, you can put your cables through and they can look quite nice, but I think some of us might have wanted to have tidied it up. But I'm only bringing that up because it's just something there. Maybe in when you're at home, you're not really going to be that bothered about it. I'm not sure it's going to particularly add any extra airflow. But as you can see, M80X, DTX, ITX all fit fine. What it also does mean is the case can rather easily consume even the very largest of graphics cards. So I'm lucky to still have here at the moment the 3080 Noctua edition graphics card that Asus released, which is well over 3 slots. If you look at the back, it's monstrous, and it's been able to swallow this completely. And also there's still just enough room to get fans underneath as well should you need it. But with a graphics card such as this, I don't think you then need to force feed it with 220mm fans when it already has them down there. But if you had a slightly smaller, more sensible sized card, then the lower fans would indeed then be quite useful. Now, not that I would build it this way, but just as a proof of concept, you can fit a 360mm AIO in the roof with the hoses at the front and still be able to get it in and around the power cable for the power supply. Obviously, normally I would have it this side, but just kind of consider that the distance between here and here is rather short. So this is a H150i. If you were to fit this that way round, the coil of hose would be immense. So now I'm actually talking myself out of it and thinking that this way might even be better, just so that you've got rid of the length of hose that you would have up here. Now, obviously, when you fit an AIO in the roof like this, it's going to increase the airflow. It's going to benefit everything in the case because it's going to help get air moving. And I would assume that this has been designed from the ground up to have equipment like this in it for testing. So you're probably wondering where the testing is and also where the rear fan's gone, because I've not fitted it back in there yet. I actually couldn't get the motherboard in there without taking the rear fan out. The problem with a case like this is it doesn't really come with a lot of fans, and I would always test the case how it arrives. But this quite clearly needs extra airflow adding in. I test with an air cooler, for example, so it's not going to perform very well, and the graphics card isn't necessarily going to be very hindered, but I assume the majority of you out there at home are going to add fans in the bottom, probably an AIO in the roof, and it's going to work incredibly well. With the way I test, and I test all the cases the same, this is the problem. I don't add things in, I test them as they arrive, and that just would not suit the Prime case at all. But the Prime case itself, it's incredibly well laid out. You can get some monstrous components in there, and there's quite clearly going to be plenty of airflow, but you are going to have to add it. I think with current generation of hardware and where things may be going in the future, you may want to be thinking about 360 AIOs anyway. Thankfully it fits. It can fit current monstrous graphics cards and where we think next generation graphics cards are going to go as well. But even if you haven't got a massive graphics card, it does mean you can add fans in the bottom to directly blow at your precious graphics to help keep temperatures down. I love the fact it comes in white and black, and the white version doesn't feel like it's kind of an afterthought. It looks like they were planned from the beginning. The only thing I can say, as being a Prime case, there aren't any Prime ITX boards yet, but I know they do Prime M80X boards. And on that point, I think personally I would end up buying an M80X board, just so it fills things out that little bit more. You don't get left with the cover or the hole there. And most importantly, and this is something I can't stress enough, most M80X boards will come in significantly cheaper than something ITX. So either of the boards I've used today, where they were ROG ones, they are quite expensive, and the price does creep up. Whereas if you step back into an M80X, even if you stayed on Z690, you are going to be saving yourself quite a lot of money. And it sounds mad, but because the board's that little bit bigger. M80X boards are a little bit more quirky. You're not going to get as many high-end boards though. So we used to have the Genes back in the day, G-E-N-E. I've not seen one of those for quite a while, but we'll have to see what next gen brings. Anyway, this is actually the third case I've had from Asus, because we obviously had the Helios, then I had the Tough case, and now we have the Prime. So we've had ROG, Tough, and now Prime. So they've kind of got a case for all of their ranges, and I think they've done very well. Yes, I've not built it completely, but as you could see, it's quite short of space. So if I'd have filled it up with components straight away, there was a lot of things that I wouldn't have been able to talk to you about or shown you. And even now, I've just realised I hadn't really spoken to you about the back, and the fact that there's lots of grommets and cable ties around the back for your cables, and another 2.5-inch hard drive. See, I'm not doing very well today. Anyway, the Prime case from Asus, monstrously big ITX case, or rather kind of on the small size with premium hardware M80X case. I can see a lot of you loving this at home. Let me know what you think. Let me know if the lack of dust filters would drive you nuts, or are you going to be one of those guys that's going to end up wanting to work on this and adding the dust filters at home yourself. Thanks very much for tuning in. This is Tiny Tom Logan. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, tell your friends, tell your nan, go and pet your dog, give your cat some biscuits, all of that sort of stuff. But for now, at least, this is the tiniest one with another video for you out. Ding! Love you, sis.